Jake Morrison stood on his front porch and looked out at his land. The sun was hot and bright in the Arizona sky. There were no clouds anywhere. The dirt was dry and cracked like broken glass. His cattle were thin and weak. Many of them had already died from lack of water and grass. Jake was 28 years old. He had brown hair that was always messy from the wind. His hands were rough and cut from working so hard. His clothes were old and had many holes. He did not have money to buy new ones. The ranch had been his father's before he died 2 years ago. Now it was Jake's job to take care of it. But he was not doing a good job. The drought had been going on for 3 months now. No rain had fallen in all that time. The well on his property was almost empty. Every day Jake had to carry water in buckets to give his animals something to drink. But there was never enough. His cattle were dying one by one. Jake walked down the steps of his porch. His boots made small clouds of dust with each step. He went to the barn where he kept his horse. The horse was a brown mare named Dusty. She was old but still strong. Jake had owned her for 5 years. She was his only friend on the lonely ranch. "Good morning, Dusty," Jake said as he put the saddle on her back. "We need to check the fence line again today." Dusty made a soft sound and moved her head up and down. She seemed to understand that there was work to do. Jake climbed up on her back and they rode out into the desert. The land around Jake's ranch was rough and wild. There were big rocks and small hills everywhere. Cactus plants grew in strange shapes. Sometimes Jake would see a snake or a lizard run across the ground. In the distance, tall mountains reached up to the sky. As they rode, Jake counted his cattle. Yesterday there had been 43. Today he could only find 38. 5 more had died in the night. Jake felt sick in his stomach. At this rate, all his animals would be dead before the month was over. Jake stopped his horse near a dried-up creek bed. This was where his cattle used to come to drink water. Now there was nothing but sand and rocks. Some old bones from dead animals lay scattered around. Jake got down from his horse and walked to the edge of the creek bed. He kicked at the dry dirt with his boot. There has to be water somewhere, he said to himself. Jake had tried digging wells in 3 different places on his land. Each time he found only dry earth and rocks. He did not have money to hire men with proper equipment. He had to do all the work himself with just a shovel in his hands. The bank in town had been sending him letters for 2 months. They wanted their money. Jake's father had borrowed money from the bank to buy more cattle and fix up the ranch. Now Jake owed them $3,000. That was more money than Jake had ever seen in his whole life. The bank president, Mr. Henderson, had told Jake he had until the end of the month to pay. If he could not pay, the bank would take his ranch away. Jake got back on his horse and rode toward the fence that marked the edge of his property. He needed to check if any of his cattle had wandered off looking for water. Along the way he saw more dead animals. A cow and her calf lay under a small tree. They had been dead for several days. The sight made Jake feel terrible. When Jake was a boy, his father had told him stories about the ranch. His grandfather had started it in 1860. Back then there was plenty of water and grass. The cattle were fat and healthy. The ranch made good money every year. Jake's father had been proud to own such a fine place. But things had changed. The weather had become drier over the years. Other ranchers in the area had problems too. Some had already sold their land and moved away. Others had given up and let the bank take everything. Jake did not want to give up, but he did not know what else to do. As Jake rode along the fence, he checked each post and wire. Some of the posts were loose in the dry ground. He would need to fix them soon, but he did not have money to buy new wood or wire. Everything on the ranch was falling apart. Jake heard a sound behind him and turned around. A man on horseback was riding toward him. It was Tom Bradley, who owned the ranch next to Jake's. Tom was older than Jake and had more money. His ranch was bigger and he had more cattle. "Morning, Jake," Tom called out as he got closer. "Morning, Tom," Jake replied. He did not feel like talking to anyone, but Tom was his neighbor. Tom stopped his horse next to Jake's. "How are your cattle holding up?" Jake shrugged his shoulders. "Lost 5 more last night. Don't have many left now." Tom nodded his head. "It's been a hard year for all of us. But I've been thinking about something. Maybe we could help each other out." Jake looked at Tom with interest. "What do you mean?" "Well," Tom said, "I've got a buyer coming next week who wants to buy a big herd of cattle. I don't have enough animals to fill his order. But if you sold me your remaining cattle, I could make the deal work. I'd pay you a fair price." Jake thought about this. If he sold all his cattle to Tom, he would have some money. But then he would have no animals left. A ranch without cattle was not really a ranch at all. "How much would you pay?" Jake asked. Tom scratched his beard. "I could give you $800 for all of them." $800 was not nearly enough to pay the bank. Jake would still owe more than $2,000. And without cattle, he would have no way to make more money. "I need to think about it," Jake said. "Don't think too long," Tom replied. "The buyer will be here next Tuesday. After that, who knows when another chance like this will come along." Tom rode away, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts. The sun was getting higher in the sky, and it was getting hotter. Jake decided to head back to his house. There was nothing more he could do out here today. As Jake rode home, he thought about his choices. He could sell his cattle to Tom and have some money, but not enough to save the ranch. He could try to wait and hope for rain, but more cattle would die every day. Or he could just give up and let the bank take everything. None of these choices seemed good. Jake felt trapped and hopeless. He had worked so hard to keep his father's ranch, but it seemed like he was going to lose it no matter what he did. When Jake got back to his house, he put Dusty in the barn and gave her some water and the last of his hay. Then he sat on his porch steps and put his head in his hands. He was tired and worried and did not know what to do next. The sun was starting to go down when Jake heard a sound in the distance. It was faint, but it sounded like someone screaming.
Jake lifted his head and listened carefully.
There it was again. Someone was in trouble. Jake knew he should probably stay home and mind his own business. He had enough problems of his own. But he could not ignore the sound of someone who needed help. His father had taught him to always help people when he could. Jake got up from the porch steps and went back to the barn. "Come on, Dusty," he said. "Looks like we have one more job to do today." Jake rode his horse toward the sound of screaming. The cries were coming from Devil's Canyon, a deep cut in the earth about 2 miles from his ranch. Most people stayed away from that place. The walls were steep and dangerous. Wild animals lived there, and sometimes bad men used it as a hiding spot. As Jake got closer to the canyon, the screaming got louder. It sounded like more than one person. Jake felt scared, but he kept going. He could not turn away when someone needed help. Jake reached the edge of the canyon and looked down. The sides were rocky and steep. At the bottom, he could see a dried-up riverbed with sand and big stones. The screaming was coming from down there. Jake found a narrow path that led down into the canyon. It was dangerous for a horse, but he had no choice. He got off Dusty's back and led her down the path slowly. Rocks fell with each step they took. Jake had to be very careful not to slip and fall. At the bottom of the canyon, Jake could hear voices more clearly now. They were speaking in a language he did not understand. It sounded like Apache words. Jake had heard Apache people speak before when they came to town to trade. Jake tied Dusty to a dead tree and walked toward the voices. He stayed low and quiet, hiding behind rocks. He did not know if the people were in real danger, or if this might be some kind of trap. When Jake looked around a big rock, he saw something that made his heart race. 3 women were tied up near the dried riverbed. Their hands were bound behind their backs with rope. Their feet were tied too. They could not move or get away. The women were Apache. Jake could tell by their clothes and long black hair. But these were not ordinary Apache women. They were very tall, much taller than most women Jake had seen. Each one looked strong and powerful. Even tied up, they looked like they could fight. One of the women saw Jake hiding behind the rock. She stopped making noise and stared at him with dark eyes. She said something to the other 2 women in Apache language. They all looked at Jake now. Jake did not know what to do. The women might think he was the one who had tied them up. They might be afraid of him because he was a white man. But he could see they were hurt and needed water. Their lips were dry and cracked. They had been in the sun for a long time. Jake stood up slowly and held his hands where the women could see them. He wanted to show them he had no weapons and did not want to hurt them. He walked toward them step by step. "I want to help you," Jake said in English, even though he knew they might not understand. The oldest of the 3 women said something in Apache. Her voice was strong but tired. She looked like she was their leader. Jake guessed she was asking who he was or what he wanted. Jake pointed to himself and said, "Jake." Then he pointed to the ropes that tied the women and made a cutting motion with his hands. He was trying to show them he wanted to cut them free. The woman who seemed to be the leader looked at Jake for a long moment. Then she nodded her head once. Jake took this to mean she understood and trusted him. Jake pulled out his knife and went to the first woman. She was the tallest of the three, with muscles in her arms that showed she was a fighter. As Jake cut the ropes around her wrists, she watched his face carefully. When her hands were free, she rubbed her wrists where the ropes had made red marks. Jake moved to the second woman. She was younger than the first, with kind eyes and a gentle face. She smiled at Jake when he freed her hands. She said something in Apache that sounded like thank you. The third woman was the youngest. She had paint on her face in beautiful patterns. Her clothes were decorated with beads and feathers. Jake could tell she was important in some way. When he cut her ropes, she touched his hand briefly and said something soft in Apache. Now that all three women were free, Jake pulled out his water bottle. It was not very big, but it was all he had. He offered it to the leader first. She took a small drink and then passed it to the others. They each drank just a little, leaving some for Jake. This showed him they had good manners and respected him. Jake looked around the canyon. He could see tracks in the sand from many horses. Someone had brought these women here and left them to die. Jake felt angry. What kind of men would do such a thing to women? The leader of the three women started speaking to Jake in Apache. She pointed to herself and said what sounded like her name. Then she pointed to the other two women and said their names too. Jake tried to repeat the names, but the words were hard for him to say. The woman tried to tell Jake something important. She pointed to the north and made hand signs. She seemed to be telling him about her people and where they lived. Jake understood that these women belonged to an Apache tribe somewhere in the mountains. Jake pointed to himself and then toward his ranch. He was trying to tell them he lived nearby and could help them. The women talked to each other in Apache for a moment. Then the leader nodded and made a sign that looked like she was agreeing to come with him. Getting the three women out of the canyon was not easy. They were all hurt and tired. The youngest one had a cut on her leg that made walking hard. Jake helped each of them climb up the narrow path. It took a long time and they had to rest several times. When they finally reached the top, Jake helped the women get on his horse and in his wagon. The wagon was small and old, but it could carry all of them. Jake walked beside Dusty, leading her slowly toward his ranch. On the way back, Jake tried to learn more about the women. The leader seemed to speak a little Spanish, which Jake knew some of. Through hand signs and the few Spanish words they both knew, Jake learned that the women had been taken by men from a different tribe. These men were enemies of their people. The women had been traveling to visit another Apache band when the enemy warriors attacked them. The women had fought hard, but there were too many attackers. The enemy men had tied them up and left them in the canyon to die. They wanted to make the women's tribe think that white settlers had killed them. Jake felt sad and angry when he heard this story. He knew that many white men had done bad things to Apache people, but he also knew that Apache tribes sometimes fought each other. There was so much fighting and hate between different groups of people. When they reached Jake's ranch, the sun was almost down. Jake helped the women get down from the wagon and brought them into his house. It was a small house with just 2 rooms, but it was clean and safe. Jake gave the women more water and some bread and beans to eat. It was not much, but it was all the food he had. The women ate slowly and thanked him in Apache. Even though Jake could not understand their words, he could see they were grateful. The oldest woman examined Jake's house with interest. She looked at his furniture and the pictures on the walls. She seemed surprised that a white man would live alone in such a simple way. Most white men she had probably known were soldiers or traders who had many possessions. Jake made a bed for the women using blankets and pillows. He gave them his bedroom and said he would sleep on the floor in the other room. The women talked among themselves for a while. Then the leader came to Jake and put her hand on his shoulder. She said something in Apache that sounded like a blessing or a prayer. That night, Jake lay on his floor listening to the sounds outside. He wondered what would happen tomorrow. The women needed to get back to their people, but Jake did not know where their tribe was. He also worried that the men who had captured them might come looking for them. But Jake felt good about what he had done. He had saved 3 people who would have died without his help. His father had always told him that helping others was the most important thing a person could do. Even though Jake's own life was full of problems, he was glad he had listened to his father's words. Jake did not know that this one act of kindness would change his life forever. Jake woke up early the next morning when the sun was just starting to rise. He could smell something cooking. This was strange because Jake had not cooked anything. He got up from his blankets on the floor and walked to the kitchen. The 3 Apache women were already awake. The youngest one was making something that smelled like corn cakes on Jake's old stove. The middle woman was outside getting water from the well. The oldest woman, who seemed to be their leader, was sitting at Jake's table looking at his account books. Jake felt embarrassed. His books showed how little money he had and how much he owed the bank. But the woman did not seem to be judging him. She looked up when Jake came into the room and smiled. "Morning," Jake said, not sure what else to say. The oldest woman pointed to herself and said slowly, "Ayana." Then she pointed to the woman cooking and said, "Kimi." She pointed outside where the third woman was working and said, "Tyann." Jake repeated the names. Ayana, Kimi, Tyann. The women smiled when he said their names correctly. Ayana pointed to Jake's books and then made hand signs. She seemed to be asking about his problems. Jake was not sure how much to tell them. But these women had already seen how poor his ranch was. There was no point in trying to hide it. Jake used simple words and hand signs to tell Ayana about the drought, his dying cattle, and the money he owed the bank. Ayana listened carefully and asked questions in her broken Spanish mixed with English words. Kimi brought Jake a plate of corn cakes. They were much better than anything Jake usually ate. The cakes were soft and sweet and filled his empty stomach. Jake had not eaten a good meal in weeks. "Thank you," Jake said to Kimi. She smiled and said something in Apache that sounded happy. Tyann came back inside carrying 2 buckets of water. She was the tallest of the 3 women and very strong. She did not even seem tired from carrying the heavy buckets. Tyann looked around Jake's kitchen and said something to the other women in Apache. Ayana translated some of what Tyann had said. "She says your well has good water, but you need to dig it deeper. There is more water down there." Jake was surprised. "How does she know that?" Ayana spoke to Tyann in Apache, then turned back to Jake. "Her people know about finding water in the desert. She can show you." After breakfast, the 3 women went outside with Jake to look at his ranch. Jake felt embarrassed about how bad everything looked. His fences were falling down. His barn needed repairs. The few cattle he had left were thin and weak, but the women did not seem to judge him. Instead, they walked around looking at everything with interest. They pointed at different things and talked to each other in Apache. Sometimes Ayana would ask Jake questions about his land or his animals. Tyann went to where Jake's cattle were standing in the shade of some trees. She looked at them for a long time. Then she came back and spoke to Ayana. "Tyann says your cattle are sick, but not too sick to save," Ayana told Jake. "She knows plants that can help them get strong again." Jake had never heard of using plants to make cattle healthy. "What kind of plants?" Tyann walked to a spot near Jake's house where some weeds were growing. She picked several different plants and brought them back. She showed them to Jake and tried to explain in mixed Apache and Spanish what they were for. Ayana helped translate. "This one helps animals drink more water. This one makes their stomachs feel better. This one gives them strength." Jake was amazed. He had always thought these were just useless weeds. But Tyann seemed to know exactly which plants could help his cattle. Kimi had been looking at Jake's vegetable garden behind his house. The garden was mostly dead because of the drought and Jake's lack of time to care for it. But Kimi seemed to see something Jake could not see. Kimi came over and spoke to Ayana. Then Ayana told Jake, "Kimi says she can make your garden grow again even without much rain. Her people know ways to save water and help plants grow in dry places." That afternoon, the 3 women showed Jake things he had never known. Tyann took him to his well and showed him how to tell where to dig deeper for more water. She pointed to certain rocks and plants that meant water was nearby underground. Kimi went to work in Jake's garden. She moved plants to different spots where they would get shade during the hottest part of the day. She built small walls of stones around the plants to hold water when it did rain. She mixed different kinds of dirt together to make the soil better. Ayana looked at Jake's account books again and asked him to explain about money and banks and buying things. She was very smart and understood quickly how Jake's business worked. She had ideas about how Jake could make money in ways he had never thought of. "Your land is near the trail that traders use," Ayana told Jake. "You could sell food and water to people who travel by. You could fix their wagons and shoes for their horses." Jake had never thought about making money from travelers. He had always only thought about cattle ranching. As they worked together that day, Jake learned more about the 3 women. Through Ayana's translation and their broken English, He discovered that they were not ordinary Apache women. Ayanna had been married before to an Apache war chief. Her husband had been killed in a battle with soldiers 3 years ago. Since then, she had been a leader among her people, helping to make decisions about trading and peace with other tribes. She knew about many things besides Apache ways. She had learned English and Spanish from traders and missionaries. Tayen had never been married. She was a warrior woman who hunted and fought alongside the men of her tribe. She was not interested in having a husband or children. She wanted to be free to protect her people and live her own way. But she was also very smart about animals and plants and survival in the desert. Kimi was the youngest, only 20 years old. She was an artist who made beautiful things with beads and paints and feathers. But she was also a keeper of stories and songs. She remembered all the old Apache legends and could tell stories that would make people laugh or cry or feel brave. The women told Jake that they were not just from any Apache tribe. They were daughters of different Apache chiefs who had formed an alliance. Their tribes worked together for protection and trade. The women had been traveling between the different bands to strengthen these friendships when they were captured. Jake was amazed to learn that he had rescued 3 Apache princesses. But the women did not act like they thought they were better than him. They worked hard alongside him and treated him as an equal. That evening, Jake made a simple dinner of beans and bacon. But Kimi added wild plants she had found around the ranch. The plants made the food taste much better. Tayen had caught some rabbits during the day, so they had fresh meat too. After dinner, the women sat with Jake on his porch. The stars were coming out in the dark sky. Kimi sang a soft Apache song that sounded beautiful even though Jake could not understand the words. "What will happen when your people come looking for you?" Jake asked Ayanna. Ayanna was quiet for a moment. "Our father will come soon. He is a great chief named Thunder Bear. He will be very worried about us." "Will he be angry that I helped you?" Jake wanted to know. "No," Ayanna said. "He will be grateful. You saved our lives. That is a sacred thing among our people." Tayen said something in Apache. Ayanna listened and then told Jake, "Tayen says you are different from other white men. You do not try to take things from us or change us. You just helped us because it was right." Jake felt good to hear this. "I don't care what color people are or what language they speak. People who need help should get help." Kimi spoke up in her broken English. "You..." "Good man, Jake, you have..." She put her hand over her heart. Good heart. That night, Jake went to sleep feeling better than he had in months. His cattle were still sick and he still owed money to the bank. But for the first time in a long while, he did not feel alone. The 3 Apache women had brought knowledge and skills to his ranch that he never could have learned by himself. Jake did not know that tomorrow would bring changes he could never have imagined. Jake woke up when he heard Dusty making nervous sounds in the barn. The horse was snorting and stomping her feet. Jake sat up on his blankets and listened. Everything seemed quiet, but something had scared his horse. Jake got up and looked out the window. The sun was just starting to come up. The sky was pink and orange and the air was still cool. Jake could not see anything wrong, but Dusty was still making noise. Jake put on his boots and shirt and walked outside. As soon as he stepped off his porch, he froze. There were Apache warriors everywhere. At least 12 men on horses surrounded his ranch house. They had appeared as quietly as shadows. The warriors sat on their horses without moving or making any sound. They wore war paint on their faces and carried weapons. Some had rifles, others had bows and arrows. All of them were looking at Jake. In front of the group was a man who was clearly their chief. He was older than the others, maybe 50 years old. His hair was long and black with silver streaks. He wore a headdress with eagle feathers. His face was painted with red and yellow designs. Even sitting on his horse, Jake could tell he was very tall and strong. The chief's eyes met Jake's. His face showed no emotion. Jake could not tell if the chief was angry or just serious. Jake felt his heart beating fast, but he tried not to show his fear. Behind Jake, he heard the door of his house open. The 3 Apache women came outside. When they saw the chief and the warriors, they called out in Apache. Their voices sounded happy and relieved. The chief said something back to them in Apache. His voice was deep and powerful. Then he got down from his horse and walked toward Jake. The other warriors stayed on their horses, watching everything. Jake stood still as the chief approached. The man was even bigger than Jake had thought. He was at least 6.5 feet tall with broad shoulders and muscled arms. Scars on his chest and arms showed he had been in many battles. The chief stopped 3 feet away from Jake and looked him up and down. Jake felt like the chief was seeing everything about him. Finally, the chief spoke in English. "You are Jake Morrison." Jake was surprised the chief knew his name and could speak English. "Yes, sir." The chief nodded once. "I am Thunderbear, chief of the Red Rock Apache. These are my daughters." He pointed to Ayana, Tyann, and Kimmy. Jake was confused. The women had not told him they were Chief Thunderbear's daughters. But then Jake remembered that Apache people sometimes adopted children from other tribes. These women might not be Thunderbear's blood daughters, but they were still his family. "I came to find my daughters," Thunderbear continued. "They have been missing for 3 days. My warriors and I have been searching everywhere." Ayana came forward and spoke to her father in Apache. She talked for a long time, using hand gestures to help tell the story. Sometimes she pointed to Jake or to the canyon in the distance. Thunderbear listened without interrupting. When Ayana finished speaking, Thunderbear looked at Jake again. This time, his expression was different. Jake thought he saw respect in the chief's eyes. "My daughter tells me you found them in Devil's Canyon. They were tied up and left to die. You cut their ropes and brought them here. You gave them food and water and a safe place to sleep?" "Yes, sir," Jake said. "I heard them calling for help. I could not leave them there." Thunderbear was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The men who took my daughters wanted to start a war between my people and the white settlers. They wanted us to think white men had killed my daughters. Then we would have attacked the town and the ranches around here." Jake felt sick thinking about this. If he had not found the women, many people might have died in a war. "But you have prevented this war," Thunderbear continued. "By saving my daughters, you have saved both Apache and white lives." Tyann came forward and spoke to her father in Apache. She seemed excited about something. She pointed to Jake's cattle and to the well and to the garden where she and her sisters had been working. Thunderbear listened to Tyann with interest. Then Kimmy came forward and showed her father some of the plants she had been using to make medicine for Jake's cattle. She spoke quickly in Apache, as if she had many important things to tell him. Thunderbear nodded as he listened to both of his daughters. Then he turned back to Jake. "My daughters tell me you have been kind to them. They say you have treated them as equals, not as prisoners. They have been helping you with your ranch and you have been learning from them." "They know things I never learned," Jake said. "They have been very helpful. They also tell me your ranch is in trouble. You have lost many cattle in the drought. You owe money to the white man's bank." Jake felt embarrassed. "Yes, sir. I'm not a very good rancher." Thunderbear smiled for the first time. "My daughters think you are a good man who has had bad luck. There is a difference." The chief walked over to look at Jake's cattle. The animals looked much better than they had 3 days ago. Tyann had been giving them the special plants she knew about. Their eyes were brighter and they seemed stronger. Thunderbear examined the plants Kimmy had been using. He nodded his approval. Then he looked at the work Ayana had done organizing Jake's business papers. "My daughters have been busy," Thunderbear said. "They have found ways to help your ranch that you did not know existed." "They are very smart women," Jake said. Thunderbear came back to stand in front of Jake. "In Apache law, when a man saves the lives of others, a debt is created. The people who were saved must find a way to repay this debt." Jake shook his head. "I don't want any payment. I just did what anyone should do." "That is why the debt must be repaid," Thunderbear said. "A man who saves lives without expecting reward is a man who deserves honor." Thunderbear spoke to his warriors in Apache. One of them got down from his horse and brought Thunderbear a leather bag. The chief opened the bag and pulled out several items. The first item was a necklace made of silver and turquoise stones. Thunderbear held it up so Jake could see it. "This belonged to my father and his father before him. It has been in my family for many generations." Next, Thunderbear showed Jake a knife with a beautiful handle carved from bone. "This knife was made by the greatest weapon maker among my people. It will cut through anything and never break." The third item was a small bag of gold dust. "This gold came from the sacred mountains where my people have lived for hundreds of years. It is worth more than the money you owe to the bank." Jake stared at these valuable gifts. He had never owned anything so precious. "I cannot take these things," Jake said. "They are too important to your people." Thunderbear put the gifts back in the leather bag. "You are right. These things are important to my people. But there is another way to repay the debt you are owed." The chief looked at his 3 daughters. They all looked back at him with serious expressions. "Among my people, when a man performs an act of great courage and kindness, he earns the right to join our family. You saved my daughters from death. This creates a bond that cannot be broken with simple gifts. Jake did not understand what Thunder Bear meant. What kind of bond? Thunder Bear spoke to Ayana in Apache. She nodded and came to stand beside her father. By Apache law, Ayana translated, a man who saves the lives of 3 unmarried daughters of a chief has the right to choose one of them as his wife. Jake's mouth fell open. He stared at Ayana, then at Thunder Bear, then at Tyen and Kimi. None of them seemed to be joking. What? Jake stammered. Thunder Bear spoke again and Ayana continued to translate. This is a sacred law among our people. You have earned this right through your brave actions. But you must choose by sunset today. If you do not choose, the debt will remain unpaid, and this will bring bad luck to both you and my daughters. Jake felt dizzy. He had rescued 3 women from certain death, and now he was supposed to marry one of them? This was not anything he had ever expected to happen in his life. What if I don't want to choose? Jake asked. Thunder Bear's expression became serious again. Then you would dishonor my daughters and insult my people. This would turn our gratitude into anger. Jake looked at the 12 warriors who were still mounted on their horses around his ranch. He understood that this was not really a request. It was an obligation. Jake looked at Ayana, Tyen, and Kimi. All 3 women were looking at the ground. He wondered what they thought about this situation. Did they want to marry him? Or were they just following their father's orders? I need time to think about this, Jake said. Thunder Bear nodded. You have until the sun touches the mountains in the west. My warriors and I will wait here. Use this time to get to know my daughters better. Talk to each of them. Learn about their hearts and their dreams. Then make your choice with wisdom. The chief walked back to his horse and mounted. The warriors moved their horses to different positions around the ranch, but they did not leave. They would stay and watch until Jake made his decision. Jake looked at the 3 women who might become his wife. He had never felt so confused and frightened in his entire life. Jake sat on his porch steps with his head in his hands. The sun was getting higher in the sky and he could feel time running out. Chief Thunder Bear and his warriors were waiting patiently around the ranch, but Jake knew they would not wait forever. The 3 Apache women were inside the house, talking quietly among themselves in their own language. Jake wondered what they were saying. Were they discussing him? Were they arguing about who would have to marry him? Or were they planning ways to make this strange situation work? Jake had never thought about getting married. He had been too busy trying to keep his ranch running and pay his bills. There had been a few women in town he had liked, but none of them had wanted to marry a poor rancher who might lose his land at any time. Now he was supposed to choose a wife from 3 women he had known for only 3 days. It seemed impossible. How could anyone make such an important decision so quickly? Ayana came outside and sat down next to Jake on the steps. She did not say anything at first. They both watched Chief Thunder Bear's warriors as they waited in the shade of some trees. You are afraid, Ayana said finally. Yes, Jake admitted. I don't know how to choose. I don't know any of you well enough to make such a big decision. My father's law may seem harsh to you, Ayana said, but among my people, marriage is not just about love between 2 people. It is about joining families and tribes together. It is about survival and making life better for everyone. Jake looked at Ayana. She was beautiful, with intelligent dark eyes and long black hair. She seemed calm and wise, like she could handle any problem that came her way. What do you think about this? Jake asked her. Do you want to marry someone you barely know? Ayana was quiet for a moment. I was married before to a great warrior named Running Wolf. We were married for 5 years before he was killed in a battle with soldiers. We loved each other very much. Jake felt sorry for her loss. I'm sorry. That must have been very hard for you. It was, Ayana said. After Running Wolf died, I thought I would never marry again. I became a leader among my people instead. I help make decisions about trade and peace with other tribes. I like having this responsibility. So you don't want to get married again? Ayana sighed. I do not dream of romance like young girls do, but I also know that my people need alliances with others to survive. If marrying you could help my tribe and also help you save your ranch, then it would serve a good purpose. Jake understood what she was saying. Ayana would marry him not for love, but because it would be practical and helpful. What about your sisters? Jake asked. How do they feel? They are not my blood sisters, Ayana explained. But we grew up together and love each other like sisters. Tyann and Kimi have different ideas about marriage than I do. Just then, Tyann came outside. She had been listening to their conversation. Tyann was the tallest of the three women with strong muscles and the confident way of walking that warriors had. I can speak for myself, Tyann said in her broken English. She sat down on Jake's other side. Tyann, Ayana said gently, Jake needs to understand how each of us feels about this situation. Tyann nodded. I never want to marry anyone. I want to be free warrior woman. I want to hunt and fight and protect my people. Husband would try to make me stay home and have babies. Jake was surprised by her honesty. So you don't want to marry me at all? Not want to marry any man, Tyann said firmly. But I understand Apache law. If Thunderbear says I must marry, then I must marry. But I tell you truth, I would not be happy wife. Jake appreciated that Tyann was being honest with him. What would happen if you had to marry me? I would be good wife in some ways, Tyann said. I would work hard. I would protect ranch from bad men and wild animals. I would teach you more about finding water and healing animals. But I would not. How do you say, love you like woman loves husband? Jake nodded. I understand. You would be a partner, but not a romantic wife. Yes, Tyann said. That is right. Kimi came outside now too. She was the youngest and smallest of the three women, but her eyes were bright with intelligence. She sat on the ground in front of the porch steps so she could look at Jake while she talked. My turn to speak, Kimi said. Her English was better than Tyann's, but not as good as Ayana's. What do you think about this, Kimi? Jake asked. Kimi smiled, and Jake noticed how pretty she looked when she smiled. I think this is a very strange situation. But maybe strange can be good sometimes. What do you mean? I am young Apache woman, Kimi said. Soon my father will want me to marry Apache man from our tribe or allied tribe. This is normal way, but I have always wondered about different kind of life. Jake was interested to hear more. What kind of different life? I love my people and our ways, Kimi said. But I also wonder about white man's world. I wonder about towns and schools and books and different kinds of art. I wonder if there are ways to be Apache and also learn new things. Ayana translated some of what Kimi said into English when she got stuck on certain words. I see your house, Kimi continued. I see your books. I see pictures on walls. These things are interesting to me. Maybe if I married you, I could learn about both worlds, Apache world and white world. But would that make you happy? Jake asked. Kimi thought about this question carefully. I do not know, but I think it might. I think you are a kind man who would not try to make me stop being Apache. And I think maybe I could help you understand Apache ways better too. Jake was starting to understand that each of the three women saw marriage to him in a completely different way. Ayana saw it as a practical alliance. Tyann saw it as an unwanted duty. Kimi saw it as an adventure and a chance to learn new things. There is something else you must know, Ayana said. Whichever one of us you choose, the other two will also stay here and help with the ranch. Jake was confused. What do you mean? Apache families work together, Ayana explained. If you marry one of us, all three of us become part of your family. We would all live here and work together to make the ranch successful. Jake had not expected this. All three of you would stay? Yes, Tyann said. Is Apache way. Family helps family. Jake tried to imagine what it would be like to have three Apache women living on his ranch permanently. It would certainly solve his problem of not having enough help with the work. But it would also be very different from the quiet, lonely life he was used to. What would people in town think? Jake wondered out loud. White people might not understand. Some white people will not like it, Ayana agreed. But some will see that we help make your ranch profitable. They will see that we are peaceful and want to trade and be good neighbors. Kimi spoke up. And some Apache people will not like it either. They will say we should not live with white man. But Chief Thunderbear has spoken. His word is law. Jake realized that this marriage would not just affect him and whichever woman he chose. It would affect how both white people and Apache people saw all of them. It could help create peace and understanding between the two groups, or it could create more problems. The sun was getting higher, and Jake knew he was running out of time. He looked at each of the three women. Ayana was wise and practical, but she did not seem to want romance. Tyann was strong and skilled, but she clearly did not want to be married at all. Kimi was young and curious, and she seemed the most interested in actually being his wife. But Jake also had to think about what would be best for his ranch and for keeping peace between Apache and white people in the area. This decision was about much more than just his personal feelings. "Can I ask you all one more question?" Jake said. All three women nodded. "If you could choose freely without any Apache laws or family obligations, what would each of you really want to do with your lives?" Ayanna answered first. "I would want to continue being a leader among my people. I would want to help make peace between different tribes and with white settlers. I would want to use my mind to solve problems." Tyan said, "I would want to be free to hunt and fight and travel wherever I wanted to go. I would want to protect people who cannot protect themselves." Kimmy said, "I would want to learn everything I could about art and stories and different ways of living. I would want to see new places and meet different kinds of people." Jake thought about their answers. Then he made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. "I want to talk to your father," Jake said. Jake walked across his ranch yard toward where Chief Thunderbear was waiting under a large tree with some of his warriors. The chief watched Jake approach with calm, serious eyes. "Chief Thunderbear," Jake said when he reached the tree, "I need to ask you something about your law." Thunderbear nodded for Jake to continue. "Your daughters have told me different things about what they want in life. Ayanna wants to be a leader. Tyan wants to be free to hunt and fight. Kimmy wants to learn about different worlds. Is there any way to honor your law while also honoring what they want?" Thunderbear was quiet for a long moment. He looked at Jake carefully as if trying to see into his heart. "You could simply choose one of them and be done with it," the chief said. "That would satisfy the law. But it might not satisfy the woman I choose," Jake replied. "And it might not be the best thing for everyone involved." Thunderbear almost smiled. "You think like an Apache, Jake Morrison. We always consider what is best for the whole tribe, not just for one person. So is there another way to handle this?" Thunderbear called to his daughters in Apache. All three women came over to stand with Jake and their father under the tree. Several of the Apache warriors also moved closer to listen. "Jake has asked an important question," Thunderbear said in English so everyone could understand. "He wants to know if there is a way to follow our law while also respecting what each of you wants in your own lives." Ayanna looked at Jake with surprise and respect. "Most men would just choose the woman they liked best and not worry about what we wanted." "I'm not most men," Jake said. "The three of you saved my ranch and maybe my life. I want to do what's right for all of you." Thunderbear spoke to his warriors in Apache. They talked among themselves for several minutes. Jake could not understand what they were saying, but he could tell they were discussing something important. Finally, Thunderbear turned back to Jake and his daughters. "There is an old Apache tradition that has not been used for many years. It is called the Year of Understanding." "What does that mean?" Jake asked. "Instead of choosing a wife today, you would agree to live with all three of my daughters for 1 full year," Thunderbear explained. "During this year, you would get to know each of them well. They would help you with your ranch, and you would help them learn what they want to learn." Tyan looked interested for the first time since this whole conversation had started. "And after the year?" "After 1 year, if any of my daughters has decided she truly wants to marry you, and if you want to marry her, then you would have a wedding ceremony," Thunderbear said. "But if none of you want to marry each other, then the debt would be considered paid, and my daughters would be free to return to our tribe or to choose their own paths." Kimmy clapped her hands together. "That sounds much better than having to decide today." Ayanna nodded thoughtfully. "It would give us all time to see if we could truly be happy together." Jake felt relief wash over him. This sounded like a much more reasonable plan than having to choose a wife in 1 day. "But there are conditions," Thunderbear continued. "During this year you must treat all three of my daughters with equal respect and kindness. You must not favor one over the others, and they must all work together to help your ranch succeed." "I can agree to that," Jake said. "What do you think?" he asked the three women. "I think it is fair," Ayanna said. "It gives us time to see if we can build something good together." "I like it better than being forced to marry today," Tyan admitted. "I want to try it," Kimmy said with excitement. Thunderbear nodded. "Then it is decided. The Year of Understanding will begin now and end when the seasons have come full circle." The chief called his warriors over and spoke to them in Apache for several minutes. Jake could tell he was explaining the decision to them. Some of the warriors looked surprised, but they all nodded their agreement. "My warriors will return to our village and tell everyone what has been decided," Thunderbear said. "But I will stay here for 3 more days to make sure everything is set up properly." You're welcome to stay as long as you need to, Jake told the chief. Thunder Bear smiled. Good. Now let me tell you more about each of my daughters so you can understand them better. The chief asked Ayanna to walk with him and Jake to a quiet spot near the ranch house. The afternoon sun was warm and Jake could hear cattle lowing in the distance. Ayanna is 26 years old, Thunder Bear began. She was married to Running Wolf of the mountain Apache when she was 19. He was a good man and a brave warrior. They were happy together. Ayanna looked sad as her father spoke about her first husband. Running Wolf and I wanted to have children, but I was never able to get pregnant. Some Apache women cannot have babies. I am one of them. Jake was surprised she was telling him something so personal. I'm sorry. That must have been hard for you. It was, Ayanna said, but it also meant I could spend more time learning other things. After Running Wolf died, I became a counselor and negotiator for our people. I helped settle disputes and make treaties with other tribes. Thunder Bear nodded proudly. Ayanna is the smartest woman in our tribe. She speaks 4 languages and can read and write in Spanish and English. She understands how money and business work. She's already been helping me understand my ranch's problems, Jake said. That is what she does best, Thunder Bear said. She sees solutions that other people miss. But she also has a kind heart. She takes care of old people and children who have no families. Jake looked at Ayanna with new respect. He had known she was smart, but he hadn't realized how much she did for her people. If you married Ayanna, Thunder Bear continued, you would have a partner who could help make your ranch very successful. She could also help build peace between your people and mine. But she told me she's not interested in romance, Jake said. Ayanna spoke for herself. I loved Running Wolf very much. I do not expect to feel that kind of love again. But I could be a good wife in other ways. I could be your friend and partner and helper. Jake understood. Ayanna was offering him a marriage based on friendship and mutual respect, rather than passionate love. Next, Thunder Bear called Tyann over. They walked to where Jake's cattle were grazing. Tyann immediately went to check on the animals, looking at their eyes and feeling their sides to see how healthy they were. Tyann is 24 years old, Thunder Bear said. She has never been married because she did not want to be. From the time she was a small girl, she wanted to do the same things as boys. She learned to hunt and fight and track animals. Is that unusual for Apache women? Jake asked. Some Apache women are warriors, Thunder Bear said. But most choose to marry and have children. Tyann chose a different path. Tyann looked up from examining Jake's cattle. I am better hunter than most men in our tribe. I can track deer for 3 days without losing the trail. I can shoot an arrow through a circle the size of a silver dollar from 50 yards away. Jake was impressed. Those are amazing skills. Tyann has saved many lives with her skills, Thunder Bear said. She has rescued children who were lost in the desert. She has driven off bears and mountain lions that threatened our village. She has brought food to our people during hard winters. But I do not know how to cook fancy food or sew pretty clothes. Tyann said honestly, I do not know how to make a house look nice or how to take care of babies. Those things can be learned, Jake said. But your skills with animals and hunting and protecting people, those are things you're born with. Thunder Bear nodded. If you married Tyann, you would have a wife who could protect your ranch from any danger. She could keep your animals healthy and bring food to your table, but she would not be happy staying home all the time. I would need to be able to hunt and ride and be free sometimes, Tyann said. I could not be wife who only cooks and cleans. I wouldn't want you to be, Jake said. A ranch needs someone with your skills. Finally, Thunder Bear called Kimmy over. They sat together on Jake's porch steps as the sun began to get lower in the sky. Kimmy is the youngest at 20 years old, Thunder Bear said. She is also the most curious about everything. Since she was very small, she has asked questions about everything she sees. Kimmy laughed. I used to drive my mother crazy with all my questions. Why is the sky blue? Why do birds sing? How do white men make books with words in them? Kimmy is our tribe's keeper of stories and songs, Thunder Bear explained. She remembers all the old legends and creates new ones. She also makes beautiful art with beads and paints and feathers. I saw some of the things she made, Jake said. They're incredible. But Kimmy also wants to learn about things outside our tribe, Thunder Bear continued. She wants to know how white people live and what they believe and how they make the things they make. Kimmy nodded eagerly. I want to learn to read books and maybe even write books. I want to see big cities and meet people from other countries. I want to know everything about everything. "Would you be happy living on a ranch?" Jake asked her. "I think so," Kimmy said, "especially if I could still travel sometimes and learn new things. And especially if I could share what I learn with other people." Thunder Bear looked at Jake seriously. "If you married Kimmy, you would have a wife who would bring joy and curiosity to your life. She would never be bored or boring, but she would need freedom to explore and learn." 3 months into the year of understanding, Jake's ranch had changed completely. Where once there had been dying cattle and dry fields, now there were healthy animals and growing crops. The 3 Apache women had brought knowledge and skills that Jake never could have learned on his own. Ayanna had used her business skills to renegotiate Jake's debt with the bank. She had convinced Mr. Henderson to give Jake more time to pay by showing him detailed plans for how the ranch would become profitable. She had also arranged deals with traders who traveled through the area, selling them food, water, and repairs for their wagons. Tyann had found 3 new water sources by digging in places where she saw certain plants growing. She had also built better fences and corrals that kept the cattle safe from wild animals. Her hunting skills provided fresh meat for everyone, and she had taught Jake how to track animals and read signs in the desert. Kimmy had started a small business making and selling Apache crafts to people who passed by the ranch. Travelers were fascinated by her beadwork, pottery, and painted designs. She had also begun teaching Jake to speak Apache, while learning more English from him. The 3 women worked together like they had been a team their whole lives. They shared all the household duties and ranch work. They took turns cooking, cleaning, and taking care of the animals. When one of them was sick or tired, the other 2 took over her responsibilities without being asked. Jake had never lived with anyone except his parents when he was young. He had expected that having 3 women on his ranch would mean arguments and jealousy. But instead he found that the women supported each other and worked together to solve problems. However, Jake was starting to notice that his feelings toward the 3 women were changing as he got to know them better. At first, Jake had tried to treat all 3 women exactly the same, as Chief Thunder Bear had instructed. But as the months went by, Jake found himself drawn more and more to Tayann's strength and independence. Jake admired how Tayann could do anything that needed to be done on the ranch. She was never afraid of hard work or dangerous situations. When a mountain lion threatened the cattle, Tayann tracked it for 2 days and scared it away from their land. When a severe storm damaged the barn roof, Tayann climbed up and fixed it herself. But Jake also noticed gentle sides of Tayann that she didn't show to many people. Sometimes in the evening, she would sit quietly and watch the sunset with a peaceful expression on her face. Once, Jake saw her carefully nursing a baby bird that had fallen from its nest. She was tough and strong, but she also had a tender heart. Tayann seemed to be warming up to ranch life more than she had expected. She told Jake that she liked having important work to do every day. She liked knowing that her skills were helping to build something permanent and good. In the old days, Apache people moved from place to place. Tayann told Jake one evening as they repaired a fence together, "We never stayed in one spot very long. But I like this ranch. I like seeing the cattle get stronger and the crops grow bigger. Do you think you could be happy living in one place for your whole life?" Jake asked. Tayann was quiet for a moment. "I think so, as long as I could still hunt and ride and be free sometimes, and as long as the work we were doing was important." Jake felt his heart beat faster when Tayann talked about staying on the ranch permanently. He was starting to realize that he was falling in love with her, but Jake also noticed that his relationship with Ayanna and Kimmy was changing too. Ayanna had become like a wise older sister to him. She gave him good advice about business and life. She helped him understand Apache customs and beliefs, but Jake never felt romantic feelings toward her. Kimmy had become like a younger sister. She was full of energy and curiosity, and she made Jake laugh every day. She was teaching him Apache songs and stories, and she was learning to read and write English. But Jake's feelings toward her were protective and friendly, not romantic. Jake could see that the 3 women were also developing their own feelings about him and about their situation. Ayanna seemed content with the arrangement they had. She was using her skills to help the ranch succeed, and she was also serving as a bridge between the Apache and white communities. Several times she had helped settle disputes between Apache bands and white settlers. She seemed to have found the kind of work that gave her life meaning. Kimmy was clearly enjoying her new opportunities to learn. She had read several of Jake's books and was working on writing down Apache stories in English so that white people could understand them. She had also started teaching Apache crafts to some of the white women who lived on nearby ranches. But Jake noticed that Kimmy often talked about wanting to visit cities and see more of the world. Tyann was the one who seemed most conflicted about the situation. Some days she seemed happy and content working on the ranch. Other days she seemed restless and eager to go hunting or riding for long distances. Jake could tell she was struggling between her old desire for complete freedom and her growing attachment to the ranch and to him. One evening in late summer, Chief Thunderbear returned to visit and see how the year of understanding was progressing. He spent several days observing how Jake and his daughters were living and working together. "Your ranch is very different from when I first came here," Thunderbear told Jake as they walked around the property. "Your daughters have transformed this place," Jake said. "I could never have done it without them." "And how do you feel about my daughters now?" Thunderbear asked. "Do you understand them better than you did before?" Jake took a deep breath. He had been thinking about this question for weeks. "I understand all three of them much better, and I care about all of them. But I have to be honest with you. My feelings are not the same for each of them." Thunderbear nodded. "Tell me. Ayana is like family to me. She's wise and kind, and I respect her greatly. But I don't have romantic feelings toward her. Kimmy is like a little sister. She brings joy to my life, but again, I don't love her as a man loves a wife." "And Tyann?" Thunderbear asked. Jake felt his face get warm. "Tyann is different. I admire her strength and courage. I enjoy working with her and talking to her. When she smiles, it makes my whole day better. I think I'm falling in love with her." Thunderbear was quiet for a long moment. "And what do you think Tyann feels about you?" "I'm not sure," Jake admitted. "Sometimes I think she might care about me too. But other times she seems like she's fighting against those feelings because she doesn't want to give up her independence." That evening, Thunderbear spoke privately with each of his daughters. Jake could not hear what they talked about, but he could see through the window that the conversations were long and serious. The next morning, Thunderbear called Jake and all three women together. "I have spoken with my daughters about their feelings," the chief said. "Ayana has told me that she is happy with her life here, but she does not wish to marry Jake. She would like to continue living here and working as a bridge between our peoples, but as Jake's friend and business partner, not as his wife." Ayana nodded. "That is what I want. Kimmy has told me that she cares for Jake like a brother, but she is not ready for marriage to anyone. She would like to continue learning and growing and perhaps travel to see more of the world." Kimmy looked a little sad but determined. "I want to learn everything I can. Maybe someday I will be ready for marriage, but not now." Thunderbear looked at Tyann. "And Tyann has told me that her feelings are complicated." Tyann looked at the ground. "I have never felt this way about any man before. Jake is kind and good, and he respects my strength. He does not try to make me be someone I am not. But I am afraid that if I marry him, I will lose the freedom that has always been important to me." Jake felt both hope and worry when he heard Tyann's words. She had feelings for him, but she was afraid of marriage. Thunderbear stood up. "The year of understanding was meant to help all of you discover your true feelings and desires. It has done that. Now you must decide how to move forward." "What are our choices?" Jake asked. "You could end the arrangement now," Thunderbear said. "My daughters could return to our tribe and your debt would be considered paid. Or you could continue as you are, with all three daughters remaining here as your friends and partners, but with no marriages." "Is there a third choice?" Tyann asked quietly. Thunderbear looked at his daughter with understanding. "There is a third choice, but it is not a traditional one. You could marry Jake, but with special conditions that would allow you to keep your freedom while also being his wife." Jake's heart began to race. "What kind of conditions?" "Among some Apache bands, there are marriages where the wife keeps her independence," Thunderbear explained. "She can hunt and travel and make her own decisions while also being part of a family. It is not common, but it is not forbidden." Tyann looked up at Jake with hope in her eyes. "Would you accept a marriage like that? A wife who would not always be home, who would need freedom to hunt and explore?" Jake did not hesitate. "I would rather have you as my wife for part of the time than not have you at all." Thunderbear smiled. "Then let us see if we can find a way to honor both Apache law and the desires of your hearts." 1 year after the year of understanding began, Jake stood in front of his ranch house wearing the finest clothes he had ever owned. The Apache women had spent weeks making him a special shirt with intricate beadwork and a vest decorated with turquoise stones. His boots were polished until they shone, and his hair was neatly combed for once. Today was his wedding. Chief Thunderbear had worked with the tribal elders to create a special marriage ceremony that honored both Apache traditions and Jake's wishes for his bride to maintain her independence. It would be unlike any wedding that had ever taken place in the Arizona territory. More than 100 Apache people had come from Thunderbear's tribe and allied bands to witness the ceremony. They had set up a temporary village of teepees and lean-tos near Jake's ranch. The smell of cooking food filled the air and children ran between the buildings playing games. But there were also white people present. Tom Bradley, Jake's neighbor, had come with his wife and children. Several families from the nearby town had made the journey to see this unusual wedding. Even Mr. Henderson from the bank was there, looking curious and slightly nervous. Jake had worried that having both Apache and white people at the wedding might cause problems. But Chief Thunderbear had been smart about it. He had invited the white people to come as honored guests, and had made sure they understood they were witnessing something historic, a ceremony that could help bring peace between the two peoples. Ayanna had spent months planning every detail of the wedding. She had coordinated with both Apache spiritual leaders and the white preacher from town to make sure the ceremony would be meaningful to everyone. She had also handled all the practical details from food preparation to seating arrangements. "Jake, are you ready?" Ayanna asked as she came up to him. She looked beautiful in a traditional Apache dress made of soft deerskin and decorated with shells and feathers. "I think so," Jake said, though his hands were shaking a little. "Where is Tayen?" "She is getting ready with the other women," Ayanna said with a smile. "According to Apache tradition, you are not supposed to see the bride until the ceremony begins." Kimi came running up to them looking excited. She was wearing a dress similar to Ayanna's but in different colors. In her hands she carried a beautiful necklace made of silver and turquoise. "This is for you to give to Tayen during the ceremony," Kimi told Jake. "I made it myself. It represents the bond between your two peoples." Jake took the necklace carefully. The workmanship was incredible. Each silver piece was perfectly shaped, and the turquoise stones seemed to glow in the sunlight. "Thank you, Kimi. It's beautiful." "I also have news," Kimi said, barely able to contain her excitement. "Chief Thunderbear has given me permission to travel to the city of Santa Fe next month with a group of traders. I will be able to see new places and learn new things just like I always wanted." Jake was happy for Kimi, but also a little sad. "Will you come back to the ranch?" "Of course," Kimi said. "This is my home now, too. But I will also have adventures and bring back new stories to tell." Chief Thunderbear approached them, looking magnificent in his full ceremonial regalia. His headdress contained dozens of eagle feathers and his face was painted with sacred designs. Several other Apache chiefs and spiritual leaders walked with him. "It is time," Thunderbear announced. The wedding guests arranged themselves in a large circle around a sacred fire that had been built in the center of Jake's ranch yard. The Apache people sat on one side of the circle, and the white people sat on the other side. Jake took his place next to the fire, with Chief Thunderbear beside him. An Apache medicine man began the ceremony by burning sage and sweet grass, filling the air with aromatic smoke. He said prayers in Apache, asking the spirits to bless the marriage and bring harmony between all people present. Then the white preacher said a prayer in English, asking God to bless Jake and Tayen's union and to bring peace between all the people gathered there. When the prayers were finished, drums began to beat in a steady rhythm. The sound seemed to make Jake's heart beat in time with the drums. He looked around the circle of faces and saw curiosity, hope, and excitement in the eyes of both Apache and white people. Then Tayen appeared. Jake's breath caught in his throat when he saw her. She wore a traditional Apache wedding dress made of the softest white deerskin. The dress was decorated with hundreds of tiny beads and patterns that told the story of her life and her people. Her long black hair was braided with ribbons and feathers, and silver jewelry caught the light as she moved. But what struck Jake most was the look on Tayen's face. She looked strong and confident, but also gentle and happy. Her dark eyes found his across the circle, and she smiled in a way that made Jake forget about everyone else who was watching. Tayen walked slowly around the circle, acknowledging the guests from both peoples. When she reached Jake's side, she stood tall and proud next to him. Chief Thunderbear stepped forward and began to speak in both Apache and English. so everyone could understand the ceremony. "We gather today to witness something that has never happened before," Thunderbear said. "A marriage between an Apache daughter and a white man that honors the traditions of both peoples." The chief explained the special conditions of the marriage. Tayan would be Jake's wife, but she would also maintain her role as a hunter and protector. She could travel when she needed to, and she could continue to serve her people as a warrior. Jake would support her freedom while she supported his ranch and their life together. "This marriage is not just between two people," Thunderbear continued. "It is a bridge between two worlds. It shows that Apache and white people can live together in peace and respect." An elderly Apache woman who was a respected spiritual leader came forward. She carried a basket woven from pine needles and grass. Inside the basket were 2 ears of corn, one red and one yellow. "The red corn represents the Apache people," the woman explained. "The yellow corn represents the white people. When these 2 corns are planted together, they grow stronger than either could grow alone." She handed 1 ear of corn to Jake and 1 to Tayan. They held the corn while she spoke more prayers in Apache. Then it was time for the vows. Jake had thought carefully about what he wanted to say to Tayan. He spoke in simple words that came from his heart. "Tayan, before I met you, I was alone and struggling. You brought strength and wisdom to my life. You helped me save my ranch, but more than that, you helped me understand what it means to truly live. I promise to support your dreams and respect your freedom. I promise to stand beside you as your partner and friend, for as long as you will have me." Tayan's vows were spoken in Apache first, then translated into English by Ayana. "Jake, you saved my life and the lives of my sisters when you found us in the canyon. But you did more than save our bodies. You saved our spirits by treating us with respect and kindness. You showed me that a man could be strong without trying to control others. I promise to share my strength with you and to help you build a good life for both our peoples." Jake placed the silver and turquoise necklace around Tayan's neck. She gave him a bracelet made of silver and leather that she had crafted herself. They held hands while Chief Thunderbear and the preacher both spoke words of blessing. The ceremony concluded with everyone in the circle standing and singing together. The Apache people sang in their own language while the white people sang a hymn in English. The 2 songs blended together in a way that was surprisingly beautiful. As the sun began to set, the wedding feast began. Long tables had been set up with foods from both cultures. There was roasted beef and venison, cornbread and fry bread, vegetables from Jake's garden, and wild plants that the Apache women had gathered. Jake and Tayan sat together at the head table, receiving congratulations from their guests. Many of the white people seemed genuinely moved by the ceremony and impressed by the Apache customs they had witnessed. Tom Bradley came up to shake Jake's hand. "I never thought I'd see the day when Apache and white folks would sit down to dinner together in peace," he said. "Maybe this marriage of yours will show people that we don't have to be enemies." Mr. Henderson from the bank also congratulated Jake. "Your ranch has become quite profitable since these ladies came to help you," he said. "I'm impressed by what you've all accomplished together." As the evening went on, Jake noticed that people from both groups were talking to each other and sharing stories. Children from Apache and white families were playing together. Some of the women were examining each other's clothing and jewelry with mutual admiration. Later that night, after most of the guests had gone to sleep in their tents and wagons, Jake and Tayan sat alone on their porch. They could hear the sounds of the temporary village around them, people talking quietly, children laughing, horses nickering in the darkness. "Are you happy?" Jake asked Tayan as they watched the stars come out. "Yes," Tayan said simply. "I never thought I could be happy being married, but this feels right. We are partners, not master and servant. What about your need for freedom? Will you be satisfied staying on the ranch most of the time?" Tayan smiled. "I think so. The ranch gives me important work to do, and you have promised I can hunt and travel when I need to. That is all the freedom I require."